Yulia Navalnaya has asked the European Parliament not to give in to war fatigue or call for peace talks with Putin. 2 weeks after her husband Alexei Navalny was killed in a Russian prison, Navalnaya said the EU must find more inventive ways of targeting Putin's criminal associates who hide money and power in EU countries.
If you really want to defeat Putin, you have to become an innovator. You have to stop being boring. You cannot hurt Putin with another resolution or another set of sanctions. That is no different from the previous ones. You cannot defeat him by thinking he is a man of principle who has morals and rules.
For years, Alexei Navalny fiercely campaigned against corruption in Russia, becoming the biggest threat to Putin's grip on power. The Kremlin threatened, imprisoned and tortured him, and is believed to have ordered his assassination. But Navalnaya has vowed to continue her husband's fight. She asked the EU to help by working hand in hand with pro-democracy Russians.
There are tens of millions of Russians who are against war, against Putin, against the evil he brings. We must not persecute them. On the contrary, you must work with them, with us. My husband will never see what the beautiful Russia of the future will look like. But we must see it.
Hundreds in Russia have been detained for publicly mourning Navalny's death as part of Putin's brutal crackdown on dissent. Navalnaya said his funeral would take place on Friday in Moscow.
Russian forces are trying to exploit tactical opportunities offered by the Russian seizure of Avdiivka and appear to be maintaining a relatively high tempo of offensive operations aimed at pushing as far as possible in the Avdiivka area before Ukrainian forces establish more cohesive and harder to penetrate defensive lines in this area. The Ukrainian armed forces withdrew from Stepove and Severne villages near Avdiivka, according to the spokesperson for Tavria Group. Before the start of the full-scale invasion, around 100 people lived in Stepove and Severne. Russian forces are currently focusing assaults west of Avdiivka in the direction of Berdichi, Orlivka and Tonenke, where Ukrainian forces established immediate defensive positions to cover their withdrawal from Avdiivka and to receive oncoming Russian offensive operations. Ukrainian military observers characterized Ukrainian fortifications west of Avdiivka as, quote, disappointing and problematic, however. Russian forces are likely continuing attempts to advance in order to deprive Ukrainian forces of the respite that would allow Ukraine to establish a more cohesive and harder to penetrate defensive line in the immediate vicinity of Avdiivka.
EU risks complicity in migrant death due to Frontex inaction. This is what the European Ombudsman has warned in a report released on Wednesday regarding the so-called deadliest shipwreck at the Mediterranean. An overcrowded vessel called Adriana sank off the coast of Messenia, Greece, and left more than 600 people either confirmed or presumed dead last June. Talking to Euronews, the European Ombudsman recommends that Frontex should withdraw its cooperation to a member state that fails to rescue migrants at sea or violate fundamental rights.
Frontex offered assistance to the Greek Coast Guard, who were in charge of any rescue operation. They offered assistance to them in the form of aerial surveillance, and they didn't get a reply to any of those calls. And under the rules, Frontex couldn't act on its own initiative. It couldn't itself go to the site, because to do so would have been against the rules and against the protocols. And when it was eventually allowed to go, it was too late.
In the report, the European Ombudsman does not conclude Frontex broke any rules, but stresses on the malfunctions of its operations. The report underlines that Frontex did not issue a Mayday relay when it first detected the Adriana through air surveillance. Yet, Greek authorities did not reply to its message on 4 separate occasions during the tragedy and refused the agency's offer to send an additional aircraft to the area.
Well, we have asked the 3 big EU institutions, we've asked the Commission, the Parliament and the Council to open a public inquiry, not specifically into the Adriana, but into the thousands of deaths that have taken place in the Mediterranean over the last number of years. And we think that such a public inquiry, an independent public inquiry, would explore the reasons why so many people are drowning in European waters.
Responding to Euronews, Frontex press office said that Frontex is actively reviewing the Ombudsman's suggestions regarding its functions and areas of expertise, committing to their effective implementation.
Okay, you next.
The Romanian parliament approved a law banning e-cigarette sales to minors in shops or on the internet. The bill also bans the use of these devices in schools. The law states that e-cigarettes can no longer be delivered through collection boxes and that packages delivered by couriers must clearly state that they contain cigarettes and the age of the customer must be verified. Anyone who fails to respect the law risks a fine of up to 20,000 euros. Belfast High Court has ruled that a UK law that gives conditional immunity from prosecution to perpetrators of violence in Northern Ireland breaches the European Convention on Human Rights. The legislation aims to ban future legal actions against people, including ex-soldiers, accused of crimes during the so-called Troubles conflict. A number of relatives of those victims of the violence are seeking to have the controversial legislation overturned. In an initial response, the government said it would take time to consider the ruling.
New banknotes featuring King Charles III are now on display at the Bank of England Museum. The notes have the same design as normal sterling banknotes, with the only change being the portraits on the front. The first coins with Charles's image have been in circulation for several months. However, the banknotes will enter circulation on the 5th of June of this year. The banknotes will circulate alongside those with the portrait of the late Elizabeth II.
UK cancer patients have a lower rate of survival compared to Norway, Canada and Australia due to what treatment is used on patients, according to 2 new studies led by UCL researchers. Only 27.7% of lung cancer patients in the UK were treated with chemotherapy, compared to 45 in Norway, 41 in Australia and 35 in Canada, finding that the UK is less likely to use chemotherapy and radiotherapy to treat patients.
A message in a bottle. It sounds like a fairy tale or song title. Instead, it is what a resident of Bacoli in South Italy found one day while taking a walk on his favorite beach.
Col mare ho instaurato un rapporto esclusivo, come se fosse un amico con il quale confidarsi, con il quale appunto trovare anche delle risposte. E questo rapporto è andato avanti fino ai miei 38 anni e ancora oggi credo che il mare sia il mio migliore amico.
The sea sent Dario an unexpected message from the Balearic Islands in Spain. It was written by an 11-year-old child talking about himself and his passions.
Circa 2000 miglia marine e 3 mesi dopo, una bottiglia affidata al mare delle isole Baleari arriva su questa spiaggia. Nel tempo della comunicazione veloce ed effimera di internet e dei social, un messaggio nella bottiglia ha un sapore particolare per chi lo invia e per chi lo riceve.
It was destiny that, after a long and perilous journey, the bottle ended up in the hands of someone who appreciated its content.
Io dal mare spesso cerco delle risposte e arrivare a leggere una lettera da un bambino è come se il mare mi avesse dato una risposta forte, a un messaggio ben chiaro scritto da un bambino di 11 anni e quindi questa cosa mi ha veramente molto emozionato.
Amid media coverage in Spain, Dario managed to get in touch with the child's parents.
Il padre, oltre a ringraziarmi, però poi ci ha tenuto a sottolineare l'importanza di mantenere la corrispondenza col bambino attraverso le lettere, la corrispondenza postale, come lui mi ha scritto proprio old school. Quindi io, oltre a rispettare molto questa cosa, reputo che sia appunto proprio quello il senso di tutto questo.
Dario expects to meet the 11-year-old soon to tell him more about himself.
La mia speranza è quella proprio di un domani di andare lì a Maiorca, di incontrarlo, stringergli la mano e raccontargli quella che è un po' appunto è la mia vita, la mia terra, che probabilmente è molto simile alla sua, con gli stessi colori, gli stessi paesaggi, lo stesso mare.
Luca Palamara per Euronews, Bacoli, Napoli.
Bitcoin stock continues to soar. The price of the cryptocurrency has shot above $60,000, a figure not reached since November 2021, where it was valued at a high of $68,991. Bitcoin has risen by 43% since the start of the year, with a current market value of almost $1.3 billion. If it continues on this streak, it is expected to beat its own record.
Daft Punk, the legendary electronic music duo, are the new stars of New York's Madame Tussauds Museum. The wax figures are dressed in personalized replicas of the Saint Laurent smoking tuxedo suits designed by Hedi Slimane for the Random Access Memories project. Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Homem Christo are the two men behind Daft Punk, hitmakers who have dominated the music charts with tracks like One More Time, Around the World and Get Lucky.